The United States and Iran, two countries that have not had formal diplomatic relations since 1979, that have spent half a century treating each other as existential enemies, appear to be on the verge of a deal right now, this week, to end a war that has consumed the Middle East for nearly a month. And I need to tell you, the terms that appear to be on the table are not some carefully negotiated compromise where both sides save face and walk away claiming victory. No, what appears to be on the table, based on everything we know as of tonight, is something much closer to what President Trump demanded from the very beginning. Unconditional surrender. That is not hyperbole, those are his words. And based on the events of the last 48 hours, it seems like someone inside Iran, someone very senior, may actually be prepared to deliver exactly that. But here is the thing. To understand why this moment is far more dangerous and far more complicated than it sounds, you need to understand what is happening inside Iran right now, because there are at least two different versions of reality coming out of Tehran, and they cannot both be true. Let me take you through this step by step. This morning, President Trump posted on Truth Social. He said, and I am quoting him here, that the United States and Iran have had over the last 2 days very good and productive conversations regarding a complete and total resolution of hostilities in the Middle East. He said that based on the tenor and the tone of these in-depth, detailed, and constructive conversations, which would continue throughout the week, he had instructed what he called the Department of War to postpone any and all military strikes against Iranian power plants and energy infrastructure for a 5-day period, subject to the success of the ongoing meetings and discussions. Now, keep in mind what was supposed to happen. Over the weekend, Trump had issued a 48-hour ultimatum to Iran: reopen the Strait of Hormuz, or the United States would begin striking Iranian power plants. That is not a small threat. Iran's entire electrical grid, the thing that keeps hospitals running, that keeps water treatment plants functioning, that keeps tens of millions of people alive in a country of 85 million, that was on the table. And then this morning, instead of launching those strikes, Trump announces productive talks and a 5-day pause. That alone would be a remarkable development. But what happened next is where this story gets genuinely strange. Within about 30 minutes of Trump posting that message, reports started coming out of Iran that flatly contradicted everything he had just said. And these were not vague denials. They were specific, point-by-point rebuttals. An IRGC-linked Iranian news outlet called Fars News published a statement that said, 1, there has been no indirect or direct contact with President Trump. 2, Trump is trying to buy time. 3, Trump withdrew from power plant strikes only after Iran's firm warning. 4, Trump's comments are nothing more than psychological warfare. And 5, and this is the one that really matters, the Strait of Hormuz will not return to pre-war conditions as long as this psychological warfare continues. Now, I want you to hold that in your mind for a moment, because we are going to come back to who exactly issued that denial and why that matters enormously. Here is what we know happened behind the scenes. According to Axios, citing Israeli officials and confirmed by multiple reporting outlets, Turkey, Egypt, and Pakistan have been passing messages between the United States and Iran over the past 2 days in an effort to de-escalate the situation. Their foreign ministers held separate talks with White House envoy Steve Witkoff and Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi. So there is a shuttle diplomacy operation happening through at least 3 different intermediary countries, and by all accounts it has been active and substantive. And here is where the story gets really interesting. The person reportedly on the other end of these negotiations, the person the United States has apparently been talking to, is Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, the Speaker of the Iranian Parliament. Now, I need to explain why that name matters, and why it is both extraordinary and deeply revealing. Since the beginning of this conflict, the United States and Israel have pursued what can only be described as a systematic decapitation of Iran's leadership. Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei was killed on February 28th in a strike on his compound in Tehran, along with roughly 40 senior military commanders. His defense minister, gone. The commander-in-chief of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, gone. Multiple layers of IRGC leadership, gone. According to one tally, at least 16 senior Iranian officials and commanders have been killed in the span of about 3 weeks. After Khamenei's death, the Assembly of Experts appointed his son, Mojtaba Khamenei, as the new supreme leader on March 8th. But here is the thing about Mojtaba, and this is important. Almost nobody has heard from him since. Trump himself said it on the runway this morning before boarding Air Force One. He said, "We have not heard from the son son. Every once in a while, you will see a statement made, but we do not know if he is living. So you have a country where the supreme leader was killed 3 weeks ago. His successor is essentially invisible. The entire senior military command has been gutted, and into that vacuum steps Ghalibaf, the parliament speaker. A man who, over the last 3 weeks, has been either the #1 or #2 most powerful person actually functioning inside the country. And that is who appears to be negotiating with the Americans. But remember that denial I told you about? The one from Fars News, the IRGC linked outlet? Well, here is what happened next. About 2 hours after Trump's Truth Social post, Ghalibaf himself, or rather his official Twitter account, posted a statement. And it was not a diplomatic hedge. It was defiant. He wrote, and I'm quoting, "Our people demand the complete and total humiliating punishment of the aggressors. All officials stand firmly behind their leader and people until this goal is achieved. No negotiations with America have taken place. Fake news is intended to manipulate financial and oil markets and to escape the quagmire in which America and Israel have found themselves trapped." So let me lay this out for you. The man who multiple credible sources say has been negotiating with the United States, including sources confirmed by Israeli officials to Axios, is publicly posting on social media that no negotiations have taken place and that he demands the humiliation of the Americans. That does not make any sense unless you understand one critical detail. That Twitter account is not managed by Ghalibaf himself. It is run by an administrator. And this is not unusual in the Iranian system. This is how all senior regime social media accounts work. In fact, you may have noticed something rather eerie over the past 3 weeks. The former supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, the one who was killed on February 28th, his Twitter account has continued posting even after his death. New statements, new messages, all appearing on the account of a dead man, because the people who control these accounts are not the people whose names are on them. So here is the question that matters. If Ghalibaf is not the one who posted that denial on his own account, who did? And the most likely answer, based on everything we know about how power operates inside Iran right now, is someone within the IRGC. Think about this from the IRGC's perspective. They are the hardline Revolutionary Guard. They are the ideological backbone of the regime. They have spent 45 years building an identity around resistance to America, death to America, confrontation with the West at all costs. And now, potentially, the acting leader of their country is secretly negotiating surrender with the Americans behind their backs. If that gets confirmed, if the IRGC knows for certain that Ghalibaf has been cutting deals with Washington, what do you think happens to him? Trump, to his credit, appears to understand this dynamic perfectly. On the runway this morning, reporters asked him who he was speaking to in Iran. Was it the supreme leader? No, he said, not the supreme leader. Nobody has heard of this guy. Nobody has heard from the second supreme leader. Then a reporter pressed him, asked for a name, and Trump said something remarkable. He said, "I do not want him to be killed. I do not want him to be killed." That is the president of the United States acknowledging out loud on camera that the person negotiating with America faces mortal danger from within his own government if his identity is confirmed. And this is where the historical parallel becomes impossible to ignore. In 1944, as the war in Europe was clearly lost for Germany, a group of senior military officers attempted to assassinate Adolf Hitler in what became known as the July 20th plot. They understood the war was over. They understood that continuing to fight meant the complete destruction of their country. But they could not negotiate openly because the true believers, the SS, the hardline Nazi apparatus, would kill them for it. So they tried to remove the obstacle. The plot failed, and every one of them was executed. Now, I am not drawing a direct equivalence here, but the structural dynamic is identical. You have a regime where the war is clearly going badly, where the rational actors can see the writing on the wall, but where a hardline ideological faction, in this case the IRGC, would rather see the country destroyed than capitulate. And the people trying to navigate a way out are caught between two lethal forces, the American military on one side and their own Revolutionary Guard on the other. And the evidence that Ghalibaf has actually been negotiating is substantial. According to multiple reports, an RJ-85 aircraft of the Iranian Air Force flew from Tehran to Islamabad, Pakistan, carrying a delegation led by Ghalibaf. And here's the detail that makes this extraordinary. That flight reportedly had the approval of the Israeli Air Force. Think about what that means. Israel, which has spent the last 3 weeks bombing Iran, gave the green light for an Iranian military aircraft to fly out of the country so that its occupants could sit down with American American negotiators in Pakistan. That does not happen unless something very real is going on. And those negotiations appear to have been substantive. Trump, on the runway, said that Witkoff and Kushner conducted the talks. He said they went, quote, perfectly. He said there were major points of agreement, almost all points of agreement. He said Iran wanted very much to make a deal. And then he laid out the terms. No nuclear weapons, not even close. No uranium enrichment whatsoever. The existing stockpile of enriched uranium, which Trump's own envoy Steve Witkoff has said Iran bragged amounted to enough for nearly 11 nuclear bombs, that stockpile would have to be physically surrendered. Trump said the United States would simply go in and take it. Not a midnight raid, not Delta Force rappelling down through a ventilation shaft. Just as a condition of the deal, you let us walk in and take it. And then there are the missiles. Trump did not say no missiles. He said, and this is his exact phrasing, low key on the missiles. That echoes reporting from this past weekend about a proposed 5-year moratorium on missile manufacturing. Not elimination, not disarmament. A freeze. 5 years, which for a country whose ballistic missile program has been one of its primary strategic deterrents for decades, is an enormous concession. Now, here is why the 5-day timeline matters, and this is the part that I think most people are missing. Trump did not pick 5 days arbitrarily. In 5 days, it will be Friday night. The markets close on Friday, and we have seen throughout this conflict that the biggest military actions, the heaviest bombing runs, tend to happen on weekends when the financial markets are closed, specifically to limit the economic shock. But there is something else that lines up with that 5-day window. The USS Tripoli, an amphibious assault ship carrying roughly 2,200 Marines from the 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit, has been steaming toward the Middle East since it departed Okinawa on March 11th. It passed through the Singapore Straits on March 17th. It was tracked approaching the North Arabian Sea around March 22nd. By the end of this 5-day window, that ship and those Marines will be in position. So when Trump says to the Iranians, you have 5 days to make this deal, or we keep bombing our little hearts out, as he put it, he is not issuing an empty threat. He is telling them that in 5 days, he will have a carrier strike group, an amphibious assault ship, over 2,000 Marines, and the full weight of the American military ready to escalate in ways that make the last 3 weeks look like a warm-up. And I think that is the reality that whoever is running what remains of the Iranian government understands. Between the damage already inflicted, the leadership that has been killed, the infrastructure that has been destroyed, and now the prospect of strikes on energy infrastructure and Marines arriving on their doorstep, the rational calculation is not whether to surrender, but how to surrender without getting killed by your own people for doing it. Trump said something on the runway that I think captures exactly where we are. He said, in all fairness, everybody has been killed from the regime. They are really starting off. There is automatically a regime change. But we are dealing with some people that I find to be very reasonable, very solid. The people within know who they are. They are very respected, and maybe one of them will be exactly what we are looking for. Look at Venezuela, how well that is working out. So here is what we appear to be watching unfold. Inside Iran, there is a power struggle happening in real time between two factions. On one side, you have people like Ghalibaf, pragmatists, who can see that the war is lost, who understand that continuing to fight means the complete destruction of what is left of the Iranian state, and who are trying to negotiate terms that allow Iran to survive, even if it means giving up nuclear ambitions, surrendering enriched uranium, and freezing missile production. On the other side, you have the IRGC, the true believers, the hardliners, who would rather see the country burn than negotiate with the great Satan, and who are using every tool at their disposal, including control of social media accounts and state media outlets like Fars News, to deny that negotiations are happening and to threaten anyone who dares to pursue them. And the United States, remarkably, appears to be actively protecting the negotiators. Trump refusing to name the person he is talking to because he does not want him killed is not just a casual remark, it is a strategic calculation. If the deal falls apart because the IRGC takes out the one person willing to negotiate, then the only option left is the one nobody wants: a ground campaign, an occupation, a generational quagmire. So the 5-day clock is ticking, the Marines are on their way, the talks are apparently continuing by phone today because, as Trump noted with what seemed like genuine bemusement, it is very hard for Iranians to physically get out of the country right now, given that much of the transportation infrastructure has been destroyed. And here is what I want to leave you with tonight. What we are are watching is not just a negotiation between two countries, it is a race between two timelines. On one timeline, a pragmatic faction inside Iran manages to close a deal with the Americans, surrenders the nuclear program, accepts the terms, and navigates what remains of the Iranian state out of this war alive. On the other timeline, the IRGC discovers what is happening, eliminates the negotiators, hardens the regime's position, and forces an escalation that benefits absolutely no 15 days.